Time, folks, we were talking about the revolution of 1800. And we were talking about how this was a revolution that was a peaceful transition because before, and in most cases, how did most revolutions happen? Through violence, by bullets, right? But this new revolution was a peaceful transition because this was a revolution by what? By the ballot, not the bullet. And so again, that's definitely something we have to keep in mind, is that this was a peaceful transition, a peaceful revolution. We also talked about the decline of political parties and a president of moderation. And this is important because when Jefferson said, "We are all Republicans, we are all Federalists," what was he trying to do to the country? He was trying to unite us again because we got so divided. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a president or a party leader that could unite us once again? I mean, we don't have to have one political party, but wouldn't it be great if we could put our country identity over our party identity and we can see what was best for all Americans versus what was best for my party? I mean, that would just be great. If someone could do that one day, that would be ideal. Anyway, folks, other things. Peaceful diplomacy. Another thing that made this a revolution was that Jefferson promoted peaceful diplomacy. The basic idea being that he wanted to make sure that we had a positive relationship with all foreign countries. In fact, one of his most common phrases was, "honest friendships with all nations, entangling alliances with none." So honest friendships with all nations, entangling alliances with none. Which means what? In your own words, what could that possibly mean? Yeah, we're going to be friends with everyone, but we're going to try to stay neutral as long as we can. We're going to try to be neutral, be best friends with everyone, but try to avoid political alliances. The last thing that made this a revolution was that this was a revolution because it created a government or democracy for the common man, which was a huge change because previously most governments served who? The wealthy. But now here's a president that said no more. This is going to be a government that represents the needs and interests of the common man. And is that kind of a big deal? Sure. It's a huge shift for us. So yay. Thanks, Thomas Jefferson. Perhaps if you were alive today, you might promote this idea of we are all Republicans, we are all Federalists. I changed my mind again, Jefferson. I want Jefferson to come back to life. Like I said, it changes. Like, with quote to quote, I change my opinion about who I want to come back to life, Jefferson or Hamilton. And at this moment, Jefferson should come back to life. And then we'll see what happens after. So let's talk about Jefferson, the pragmatic president. Jefferson, the pragmatic president. So first off, what does the word pragmatic mean? When they call someone pragmatic, you know what that means? It's someone that's reasonable. Someone that can't have babies? The word pragmatic means someone that is reasonable, someone that is open-minded. No, it does not mean that you can't have babies. And so, Jefferson, the pragmatic president, he was considered open-minded when he became president. He was considered reasonable. But if you remember early Jefferson, like George Washington's administration Jefferson, was he open-minded? No, he was very small-minded, very strict-minded. He said, no, only these policies, only strict construction, nothing else. Any of Hamilton's ideas are bad and we should do none of them. And then he becomes president and he realizes, oh, now I see why Hamilton wanted to pass these policies. They're pretty good. Okay, I got it. Couldn't he have just been like, end everything? But he didn't because he was pragmatic. Let's talk about the things that he did. Number one, the Alien and Sedition Acts. So here's what he did with regard to the Alien and Sedition Acts. He did two things. Number one, he pardoned all those arrested under the Alien and Sedition Acts. What does it mean to be pardoned? Released, forgiven, set free. So he pardoned all those arrested under the Alien Sedition Act. He thought, this is a really unfair law. We should let these people go. So he pardoned them. Secondly, he created a new naturalization law. What is naturalization, folks? To become what? Yeah, Jesus? To become a citizen, specifically to become a citizen. And he changed the naturalization process with this new law from 14 years to 5 years. So before, it would take 14 years to become a citizen under the Alien and Sedition Acts. Now it only takes 5 years. Why might he have done this? So there could be more citizens, and these citizens could what? Vote. And so he felt this would be best for the country. And so we could, hey, that's a pretty good idea, Jefferson. I like that. That's a pretty open-minded idea of you. You expanded this idea of allowing more people to vote. Good job. Thanks, Jefferson. So naturalization. And again, he pardoned those arrested under the Alien and Sedition Acts. The next thing that he did was that he repealed the whiskey excise tax. He repealed the whiskey excise tax. So again, the next thing that he did was that he repealed the whiskey excise tax. What does that mean, to repeal? He got rid of it. So he repealed the whiskey excise tax because he believed it was bad for who? The common man. It was bad for farmers. So he said, look, the one thing I'm going to get rid of above all else is this whiskey excise tax, because that's just terrible for farmers. I mean, it clearly affects farmers only, and that's not fair. But then he got to the bank. And what would you expect Jefferson to do with the bank? Once he became president, he saw the bank. What do you expect him to do? Destroy it, crush it. But that's not what he did. He decided to keep the bus. He said, you know what? The Bank of the U.S., we're going to keep it. Because ultimately, you were right. The bank is good because what is it doing? What is it helping us to do? Stabilize the economy and pay off the debt. Print money, whatever else. But it's helping us pay off the debt. So you know what, Hamilton? Begrudgingly, I say that I was wrong. I will keep this bank. Still hate you, but you were right about the bank. Okay, so he keeps the bank. And is that surprising for most people? Yes. So would you describe Thomas Jefferson as being pragmatic? I would say so, because that's pretty open-minded. That's like, let's say Barack Obama, he leaves next election, and a Republican president runs on the platform that Obamacare is terrible. And then once that guy becomes president, what does he do? He keeps Obama. Like, oh, this is pretty good. Never mind, we're going to keep it. That's the basic idea. He keeps the bus. Yeah. That's always a good question. There's a fine line between being a hypocrite and being pragmatic. Most people saw him as being pragmatic because he reasoned that, because he admitted he was wrong. And he said, yeah, I was wrong about this. It's not like, oh no, I always believed this was right. He admitted that he was wrong about it. Versus hypocrites would be like, oh no, you're wrong, I'm right, and I was always right at the time. That's a hypocrite. Pragmatic people are the ones that can admit their mistakes and then accept new ones, or accept new decisions. Anyway, what about the tariff? The tariff of 1789. Jefferson hated this too, and he said, I hate the tariff. So what do you expect him to do with the tariff once he becomes president? Repeal it, get rid of it. But he doesn't. He keeps the tariff too. Because is the tariff helpful? Yes, it's helping us pay off the debt, and it's also protecting American businesses, infant industries. And so he says, yeah, this is actually pretty good. I actually kind of like this. Jefferson also promotes industrialization. Is that something that he did before? No, but he realizes, in order for America to become strong, you need factories, or at least manufacturing. Okay, Hamilton, you're right about that too. So he promoted industrialization. Jefferson also began to promote industrialization. And lastly, assumption. Remember how Jefferson absolutely hated assumption? He thought it was completely unfair. Like, oh, you can't have assumption. That's not fair to the states. And then what did he do? He kept it anyway. Like, oh, actually, this is pretty good because it creates national unity. So I was wrong about the national debt or the assumption as well. So he kept assumption. Pragmatic? I would say so. Again, some people might call him hypocritical. I would disagree with that. I think he was more open-minded. It's okay, now that I'm president, I'll actually listen to you now. Versus before, he just like kept his ears closed. Like, I don't care what you say. I'm not going to do it. Now he was a bit more mature. You know, after becoming like 50. Finally became mature. Hey, some of our congressmen are not mature. Some are still pretty like childish. Like, I'm sure you guys could compromise. Like, hey, either we drive this car over this cliff or you guys decide which ice cream we're going to eat today. Drive the car off the cliff. We're never going to figure this out. But the congressmen, they can do it. Or it's like, hey, either we buy ice cream for everyone in this car or no one gets ice cream and we'll drive it off the cliff. They go like, well, I don't want ice cream. Well, can't at least we have ice cream? No one can have ice cream. If I don't want it, we drive it off the cliff. Anyway, there's that. All right, let's talk about Jefferson battling the Supreme Court. Jefferson battles the Supreme Court. Yeah, if you guys didn't know this, when Jefferson became president, he merged with Optimus Prime. And he became Thomas Jefferson Prime. Featured here. I like that. Mighty Morphin Thomas Jefferson. That's a good one. All right, here we go. Here's the background. In 1801, John Adams and the Federalists in Congress passed the Judiciary Act of 1801. So here's what you have to know first. In 1801, John Adams and the Federalist-controlled Congress, it's important to know that this was passed by John Adams and the Federalist-controlled Congress. They passed the Judiciary Act of 1801. And the Judiciary Act of 1801, which was passed by John Adams and this Federalist-controlled Congress at the time, included what are known as the midnight appointments. And the midnight appointments were last-minute appointments of judges, or the last-minute appointment of Federalist judges to the judicial branch. Again, they were the last-minute appointments of Federalist judges to the judicial branch. You see, folks, in the election of 1800, who won that election? The Federalists or the Republicans? The Republicans won. The Republicans won because Thomas Jefferson became president, and also the Federalists are going to lose control of Congress. So have the Federalists lost the White House? Yes, and they've also lost Congress. So their fear now is, oh my gosh, are the Federalists going to be powerful anymore? No, they feared losing both houses. So they said, I know what we're going to do. Quiet down. We're going to go ahead and put as many Federalist judges in the judicial branch as we can. Because are judges elected into office? No, they're appointed, and judges serve for how long? For life. Judges serve for life. And so what they were trying to do was to almost hijack the judicial branch. Does that make sense to everyone? They were trying to hijack the judicial branch. Now, are the Republicans happy about this? Like, you can't do that. That's what they called against the will of the people. They said it was against the will of the people. You lost the last election. You can't try and steal the judicial branch. That's not okay. And so, what ends up happening is that once the Republican Congress takes charge in 1802, they repeal the Judiciary Act of 1801. The Republican Congress, now that they're in charge, they repeal the Judiciary Act of 1801. Everyone good so far? Okay. I'll let you take note of this.
Wait, repeat what again?
So again, in 1802, the Republican-controlled Congress repeals the Judiciary Act of 1801. Now, 1801 is when it was passed, 1802 is when it was repealed. In that 1 year time, is it possible that some of those Federalist judges already got their jobs? Sure. The ones after did not. But one of the people that did receive their job was the new Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Marshall. And John Marshall was a Federalist. And one of the most influential people in American history. You may not know who he is, but he is the most important Supreme Court justice in our history as a country. And we'll talk about why later. But he is one of the midnight appointments. And he got his job. Good so far. Okay. So, here's where that showdown happens. Eventually, a Supreme Court case happens, and this Supreme Court case is called Marbury v. Madison. And we're going to go over several Supreme Court cases this year, but the first you should know is Marbury v. Madison. So here's what happened in Marbury v. Madison. William Marbury here, he was a Federalist judge that was denied his appointment. They said, sorry, William Marbury, but you can't have that job anymore because it took you too long to get it, and we're not going to give it to you. So William Marbury was a Federalist judge who was denied his appointment. Well, he was denied by James Madison, who was Secretary of State at the time. And he said, it's my job to give out all the appointments, and I'm not giving it to you because you're a Federalist and we repealed that law. Does that make sense to everyone so far? So Madison says, I'm not giving you your job. Marbury's not happy about that. So Marbury says, oh yeah, I'm going to sue you. So Marbury sues Madison, and he sues Madison directly to the Supreme Court. He sues Madison, and he goes straight to the Supreme Court saying, John Marshall, I want you to hear this case. And he thinks this is a great idea. Why?
Because he's a Federalist, and the Chief Justice is also Federalist.
Right. He's a Federalist. So he thinks, ha ha ha, I got you, Madison. I got you, Jefferson. John Marshall's going to have to give me my job because he's a Federalist and I'm a Federalist and we're all Federalist buddies. So, I'm going to get my job. So he's super confident about all of this. He thinks, I'm going to get it. I'm going to win. No big deal. And John Marshall receives the case in front of him. He says, all right, this is Marbury versus Madison. He reads it over and he says, no. And he dismisses the case. He refuses to hear it at all. Now who considers this a win? Madison and the Democratic Republicans and Jefferson say, yes, we got it. Jefferson is the winner in this sense. But he wasn't really. Because when John Marshall dismissed the case, he wrote something in his decision that really made Jefferson angry and made the Supreme Court immensely powerful. And so whenever we talk about Supreme Court cases, folks, we'll always end with talking about the decision. So go ahead and write down decision. So the decision of the Supreme Court case, Marbury versus Madison, was the following. First off, original jurisdiction. You have to know a few terms. Marbury was denied his court case because he did not have original jurisdiction. I'll explain this term. But Marbury was denied because he did not have original jurisdiction. or rather the Supreme Court did not have original jurisdiction to hear the case. What original jurisdiction means, folks, at least in the case of the Supreme Court, is that only states and foreign countries can start at the Supreme Court. Only states and foreign countries can start their cases at the Supreme Court. So for example, if California and Texas are mad at each other, can they sue each other in the state of Nevada? No. Where do they start their case? Supreme Court, because is there any other case court that they can go to? No, they start at the Supreme Court. The same is true for foreign countries, right? Let's say China is mad at Obama and wants to sue him. Are they going to sue in California court? No, they're going to sue directly to the Supreme Court. Does that make sense to everyone so far?
Yeah.
Now, is William Marbury either of those things? No. So what Marshall says is, I'm sorry, I can't hear your case because you don't have, or we don't have original jurisdiction here. If you were a state, or if you were a foreign country, yeah, we'd hear it first. But we can't, because you're not a state or a foreign government. Instead, we do have something called appellate jurisdiction. We have appellate jurisdiction. And what that means is that I'd be willing to review your case after what? After you've done what? Gone where first? The states. He said, I can only review your case after you've gone to the states first. And then if you go to the states and you don't like the state's decision, then can you come to the Supreme Court? And then can I review the case? Which suggests that if the Supreme Court has appellate jurisdiction over state cases, who's more powerful? The Supreme Court. If I'm allowed, if let's say Roger's mad, so Roger goes to his mom first, say, I'm mad. You know, like Dad won't let me go to the mall. I want to go to the mall. And your mom says, okay, you can go to the mall. But then your dad says, whoa, no, you can't go to the mall. Who has appellate jurisdiction? Your dad might have, and then your mom might not be okay with that, and then like it gets all problematic. But anyway, that's what happens. Or if you have a problem with, say, another student, maybe you go to the teacher first. And then ultimately, if the teacher doesn't handle your problem, who can you go to? The principal. But should you go straight to the principal first? Like, no, figure it out. I'm sure you have teachers that can help you with that. That's the same idea here. If you have a problem, go to the state. If you're not happy with that decision, I'd be more than happy to review that case because I have the power to. And this power that he just gave himself is called judicial review. And judicial review, folks, is one of the most powerful powers in Congress today. Or not Congress, in the government today. And what judicial review said is very similar to what you guys have written down before, is that it gave the Supreme Court the final say in the constitutionality of law. It gave the Supreme Court the final say in the constitutionality of law. Again, it gave the Supreme Court the final say in the constitutionality of law. Now, who's really upset about this? Jefferson and the Republicans. Because, especially Jefferson and Madison for sure. Because in 1796, who did they say had the final say in the constitutionality of law? The states did, because the states had the power of nullification. But what Marshall has just did is said, nope, no, nullification, no, you don't have that power. The Supreme Court has the power to determine the constitutionality of law. So states, you can nullify whatever you want, but I reserve the right to say, no, you can't do that, because I have the final say. So by creating judicial review, this made the federal government immensely more powerful than the states, because he solidified in saying, we have the final say, not you 13, 15, 50 individual states. We have the final say. And even more so, he said, we have the final say, not the president or Congress. And by the way, which party is running the presidency and Congress right now? The Republican Party. So the Republican Party have just been told by this Federalist judge, you don't get the final say, I do, when it comes to laws that are constitutional or not. So does that make him very, very powerful? Almost definitely. So you guys definitely, absolutely, 100% need to know Marbury v. Madison. It is hands down the most important Supreme Court case, and it is guaranteed to be on the AP test and your unit test. Everyone good on Marbury versus Madison? Yeah. On a show of 1 to 5, show me your understanding of this case and judicial review. Wonderful. Let's move on. International issues. So stuff that happened in other countries. Okay. Here we go. Let's talk about Jefferson's military. When Jefferson became president, he decided to reduce his military. Is that revolutionary or not revolutionary? That's pretty revolutionary, folks, because what are most people doing with their militaries? Increasing, expanding. But he said, no. I want to reduce my military. So why did Jefferson want to reduce the military? So generally, folks, he first off reduced the army. Why did he want to reduce the army? He wanted to save money. Good. He wanted to save money. Also, if we don't have an army, what are we less likely to do? Go to war. So he wanted to avoid war. If you don't have an army, you can go to war? Are other countries going to see you as a threat? No, so they're not going to attack you. Well, they might attack you, but you're less likely to be attacked if you have an army. For example, Costa Rica today has no army. The country of Costa Rica, no army. They contract with the United States so that if they're ever invaded, America can come and help them. So they pay for our services. But otherwise, Costa Rica has no army. Interesting. The last thing is, why might they not want to have a standing army in the U.S.? What is Jefferson afraid of? Not alliances, a military dictatorship. They're afraid that this might result in a military dictatorship. It doesn't mean that Jefferson will be a dictator, but if we have a military, let's say of 30,000 people, might one of those generals go crazy? Yeah. And be like, we should take over this country. Sure. So there's a fear that that might happen. So for those three reasons, he reduces the army. And he also reduces the navy for the same reason. But what's the concern, though? If we don't have a military, what's the problem? There's no defense. So he says, don't worry, I got a solution to that defense problem. And he decides to create a small navy called the Mosquito Fleet. And he creates a Mosquito Fleet of 200 small gunboats. 200 small gunboats. It's these small boats that have one gun each, but he liked them because they moved really fast. And he said, these Mosquito gunboats will be great in terms of what? Protecting us. They'll be able to defend us, but the best part is, what can't we do with them? We can't invade another country, but we can defend ourselves, and will this buy us some time to raise an army if we ever are invaded? Yeah, so we're like, no, don't worry. The Mosquito Fleet should be sufficient to defend ourselves, and then we can raise an army, but it's not big enough or good enough to invade England or France, because these aren't warships. These aren't galleons and whatever else. These are small ships. So good enough for defense, no threat of war. Good? Yay. Then the Louisiana Purchase. You guys know this. The Louisiana Purchase. Well, here's the background, folks. Previously, the Louisiana Territory was owned by Spain, right? So previously, the Louisiana Territory was owned by Spain. But in about the 1800s, early 1800s, Spain was forced to give the Louisiana Territory to who? Napoleon, or France. Because Napoleon said, hey, give me that territory or I'm going to destroy your country. So Spain is like, okay, here's the Louisiana Territory. Now, is America okay with France now controlling the Louisiana Territory? No. They were okay with Spain at the time because Spain was a weak country. So if we ever needed to, we could always just take the land by force because Spain is a terribly weak country at the time. But Napoleon, is Napoleon a weak individual? Is France a strong country? Yes, so now we're concerned and we're thinking, crap, if we want access to what? Port of New Orleans and the Mississippi River, we're going to have to ask Napoleon for access. And if he doesn't give us access, what are we going to have to do? We're going to have to go to war. And is that what we want? No. So we decide we're going to have to negotiate. So he decides to negotiate with Napoleon. By the way, folks, if Napoleon said no, what were we going to do? We were going to go to war, and who are we going to ask to help us against France? The British. We were going to ally with the British to go to war with the French. Which is why, again, we have this weird triangle love relationship with the Americans, the British, and the French. Like, if two of them are not friends and the other two are friends talking behind the other person's back, but then really they're best friends with the other guy, it's weird. It's just a strange love relationship between the three countries. So Jefferson sends 2 delegates to France to negotiate. And he tells them to offer Napoleon $10 million. So the original offer is this: Napoleon, we will offer you up to $10 million if you give us what? Not the territory, the Port of New Orleans. All we want is the Port of New Orleans, access to Port of New Orleans, and what else? And the Mississippi River. I probably should have included that. And we want to try to buy all lands east of Louisiana. So pretty much, folks, we were trying to buy this territory right here for $10 million. Does that make sense to everyone? We wanted to buy that territory for $10 million. New Orleans, access to the Mississippi River and all lands east so we can have more access to the ocean, right? That's what we wanted. Now Napoleon hears them out and says, how much money did you bring with you? Because how about this? I will give you Louisiana for $10 million. But if you give me an extra $5 million, I'll also give you all of this for $5 million more. What? And the delegates were like, we're gonna have to think about this. But were they excited? They're like, oh my gosh. Is he serious? Is he honestly gonna give us? Because remember, all they wanted was this territory for 10. For $5 million, they would get all of this for $5 million more. And so they get Jefferson on the phone, which obviously phones didn't exist back then, but it was kind of like this. He was like, hey, Jefferson, Napoleon said he'd give us the entire Louisiana territory for $50 million. He's like, And Jefferson wanted it, but he was conflicted. Because the problem is, how much did Jefferson say they could spend? 10 million. And what lands were they supposed to get? All lands east. Is this east? No, that's west. And Jefferson said, I want to buy it so badly, but I don't think I can. Because he believed that if he bought this land, he believed it would be what? Unconstitutional. He said, nowhere does it say I have the power to buy territories. And nowhere, I never authorized 15 million, I only authorized 10. And I asked for lands to the east, not lands to the west. He's like, I don't know what to do. I don't want to be a hypocrite, but this would be so good. And he's so conflicted about it. He's like, he's beating himself up because he knows he wants it, but he knows that he might be considered, a terrible person. So ultimately he decides, okay, fine, we'll do it. And then he shakes his hand across a 3,000-mile ocean to shake Napoleon's hand symbolically through paper. And they agree. So Jefferson agrees to $15 million purchase of the Louisiana Territory, which, by the way, folks, is the greatest land purchase in all of human history. For $15 million, you got all of this. Here's why he did it. So why did Napoleon sell it, and why did Jefferson buy it? First off, why did Napoleon sell? He was broke. And what was he still doing? He was still fighting his Napoleonic Wars. And he absolutely, desperately needed money. So he said, I need money, so yeah, I'm going to need 15 million, so I'll just sell it to you. The other reason why was that he did have a colony in Santo Domingo, but that colony failed. It had a revolution. He couldn't control it, and he realized maybe it's not so good to have an empire right now in America. So that's why Napoleon sold it. Lack of money, lack of control of a French empire. That's why he did it. Why did Jefferson buy? That's a more important one, though. Here's why Jefferson bought the deal. Number one, it avoided war. Because might we have had to go to war? Most definitely. So we avoided war, which is a plus. Two, it avoided an alliance with who? The British, because we might have had to have signed an alliance with British. So it avoided an alliance with the British. Three, it removed the French from North America. It removed the French from North America. Which is good. Why? Do we have to worry about them attacking us anymore?
Nope.
No. So 1, no war with France. 2, no alliance with England. 3, we removed France from North America. 4, it doubled the size of the U.S. I mean, guys, look at all that land. It literally doubled the size of the U.S. And 5, it allowed us to be able to what now? Expand further west and have access to the Mississippi River. And who's really happy about that westward expansion? Who is that going to benefit the most? All this new land. Common man, farmers. Jefferson's going to be really happy about that. And so, yeah, Jefferson opted to do it. And by the way, folks, Jefferson had to make this decision pretty quickly. Why? What was he afraid of? Not war, that Jefferson might take the offer back. Like, let's say the offer was at like 10 o'clock, and then Jefferson got back to him at 10:01, and Napoleon's like, oh no, I changed my mind. Can you imagine? No! I fell asleep, I'm sorry. I overslept, and I didn't get back to you in time. And I bet Jefferson would have beaten himself up if he had taken too much time, but he didn't, and again, greatest land purchase. Last thing, Lewis and Clark. We've bought the land. Now what do we have to do?
Explore it.
Explore it. So, Lewis and Clark were contracted by Thomas Jefferson to explore this new Louisiana territory. Meriwether Lewis, by the way, was Thomas Jefferson's personal secretary. So he was like, hey, you're not doing anything. It's like me telling Paolo, hey, Paolo, you're not doing anything right now, right? Can you explore the Louisiana territory for like 2.5 years? Okay, bring a friend. You don't want to get lonely. But that's what happened. He had a personal secretary that he hires, like, hey, Lewis, bring a friend and a few others and go explore the Northwest Territory. They were supposed to do 3 things. What were they supposed to do? Well, one, they're supposed to establish relations with natives, hence furs, animals, whatever else. So one, establish relations with Native Americans. That was one of the first major goals. And by the way, they would walk up to natives like, hey, so we just bought the land, and pleased to meet you, we're Americans. And they're like, what do you mean you bought the land? You didn't buy it from us. Oh no, we bought it from the French. Like, but the French don't own this land. We own this land. Like, but we gave them money. So I think we're the rightful owners now. And from this point on, we'll screw over Native Americans. So we'll get to that. Native Americans get screwed over a lot. But yeah, so we were supposed to establish relations with Native Americans to let them know that we just bought the land that they did not know that was sold. 2, they were supposed to map the territory. And 3, their job was to discover a water passage to what? The Pacific Ocean. They were supposed to discover a water passage to the Pacific Ocean. Of course, they were led by their Native American guide, Sacagawea, or Sacagawea, or whoever you want to pronounce it. She was their guide. She was their translator. Yes, she did have a baby the entire time she went, which makes her pretty hardcore. She brought a baby with her everywhere she went. That was kind of cool. Also, one of the other cool people they brought with them was their slave York, who was also like their best friend, because they had this weird best friend but I own you relationship. They grew up together. It was like a child slave and they grew up. So like Lewis and Clark had a friend slave. Weird. And the Native Americans loved York. They thought he was the most fascinating thing in the world because they'd never seen a black man before. So they'd walk up to York and touch his skin and be like, oh, it's real. They assumed that his skin was like painted on. I was like, how did you do that? Like, were you in like fire for several years? Like, why are you so dark? Assuming that maybe they were burnt, and they loved York's hair. Like he had like that curly hair up top. Like, how'd you do that? How did you get your hair so curly like that? That's amazing. And so they loved York more than anything else. But yeah, their job was to explore the northern half of the Louisiana Purchase, folks. And this took them over 2.5 years. And they traveled 7,689 miles. So you do that. I'll just say, hey, after you graduate from high school, why not go on a 2.5-year trek by foot through wilderness? Yes, there'll be bears and Native Americans and poisonous stuff, but should be good. Should be fun. 7,689 miles. All right, folks, your only homework is chapter 12. I'll see you guys later. Have a good day.